All right, we are live. Welcome back to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and it is great to be back with you guys. I know that we took our first 2-week hiatus in the history of the show. I'm sorry. I got a new job. I've got important things to do. I've got a brand to build. I've got people that rely on me. And then, of course, we had MJ BizCon last week. It was a great event. I had a great time. I got to see a lot of my friends in the cannabis industry. I got to meet a lot of new people. It's crazy when you go out to a conference and you see people that you've been doing business with for a year and a half, 2 years, but you've never met them in person because we're remote. It was COVID and everything else. So it was great to finally meet all my friends in person and everything else. If you guys haven't made it out to MJ BizCon, I know it gets a bad rap because there's a lot of just Chinese vape hardware companies out there, but it's a good place to be. I know they've got MJ Unpacked now. I didn't get a chance to check out that show, but I've heard good things. So, you know, that is the one thing I love about this industry is the people. And when we get to do these shows, we get to do these events, it's always fun to hang out with everybody in the industry. Folks, today I've got a great guest for you, and it happens to be the perfect timing because they launched a really cool announcement. If you can't see my shirt, well, that's because I'm a little out of shape. But you see here, I've got my Kid Dynamite Mike Tyson shirt on. So hopefully that will give you a hint of who we're talking to today. But before we go into it, of course, we've got the ad. Friends at Contempo, definitely check them out. But today's ad is brought to you by me. I'm going to take advantage because it's my show. Today's show is brought to you by the Heisman brand, folks. We just launched Heisman by Ricky Williams. We launched our press release on Monday. Our cannabis will be on shelves in California in about 2 weeks. We've got awesome merch. You got tie-dye hoodies. We've got shirts. We've got hats. We've got it all. Check it out for the OG cannabis activist, Ricky Williams. If you remember him, check it out. Go to Heisman, Heisman.co or Heisman.shop to check everything out. Yeah, man, that's us. That's what we're doing. You're going to see a whole lot more for us coming soon. Follow us on Instagram at Heisman.official. So I can take the ad space because it's my show. I did that, but I'm very excited to talk to someone who launched a very similar business to what we're doing because it is another icon that I love, I respect, and someone whose story I can't wait to interview one day. And I hope I do get the chance to interview him. I think that actually might be coming up soon, but we'll see. So without any further ado, let me talk to the man who's helping launch that business, Jesse Channon. Jesse is the CRO of Columbia Care. Thanks for joining me, man.
Hey, great to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. No, it was an absolute pleasure. So I remember when Sam reached out to me and booked you for the show, her intention was the rebrand of Columbia Care to cannabis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to hear that. I want to talk to you guys about that. I wanted to learn more. And then obviously I saw the Tyson announcement and I'm just like, holy shit, when am I talking to this guy? I'm talking to him tomorrow. Okay. This is perfect timing. So I want to get into the Tyson stuff, but let's start with all the obligatory background and all that stuff. Columbia Care, you guys are a very large cannabis operator, vertically integrated in about 18 markets. You've got great coverage across the Northeast, and that's a topic I want to dig into. And then, of course, you're in my backyard here in South Florida, right? And it's funny because I told somebody I was talking to you, and it's like, I don't know how I feel about them. It's just so medical and sterile. I'm like, yeah, have you been in a Columbia Care lately? He's like, what do you mean? Now, okay, I'm going to call him out on who it is. This is my CEO and the former head of Green Lane Brands, right? That's who told me this. And I go, you know, all your higher standard stuff is on display in their Delray Beach store. He's like, what do you mean? I go, dude, that's literally where I found the higher standards glass tips for the first time because they were out on display. So I think you should head over to the Delray Beach store and take a second look because yes, when you show up, they do give you the piece of paper with the strains on it that are available, like most of the dispensaries. I'm like, but they have accessories out. They've got great suggestions. Candidly, from a retail experience, I think that Columbia Care on Delray was one of the best ones that I've had in Florida from the overall retail experience. And I do mean that. You know, products, Florida still has a lot to catch up across the board with products, but as a cannabis consumer, I really enjoyed it. So I'm very interested to hear, you know, I know you joined in 2019 and then you got slapped in the face with a pandemic, but I'm really interested to hear about this rebrand and what that would mean for Columbia Care, which will now be cannabis.
Yeah, no. So first of all, I mean, quick shout out to Ricky Williams, right off the front. I mean, very similar to what we're going to talk about, I'm sure, with Mike. The people that are authentic ambassadors for our space, the men and women that have been doing it, that have been true to themselves the whole time, that have never wavered, even before, you know, we had 90% plus approval ratings for cannabis reform in this country. I mean, we have to embrace that, and we've got to continue to support those things. So love what you're doing, man, and count me in for merch. I'll get on it 100%.
Awesome.
So look, the rebrand, it was pretty simple. When I first joined the company, I had met with the team, and I had spent a lot of time with Nick and David, and I learned the story. And I was super taken back. I didn't understand that there was that much focus on medical and research and development and things like that in the cannabis space, right? And here was this team, our chief science officer, Dr. Rosemary Mazanet, is, a brilliant clinical oncologist by trade, right? And so there's just this incredibly impressive team that had been doing all the right things for years, which is why we ended up with this great big footprint. Because we were a company that a lot of people trusted to come in and do the right things and be focused on the patients and provide really high quality, really consistent products. But fast forward into 2019, moving into 2020, when I joined, and it became obvious that, we're in Massachusetts, we're in California. We hadn't yet bought TGS in Colorado, but we eventually moved into there, right? Illinois flips. We're in Arizona now. We serve so many adult use recreational markets, and the mix of our patient versus customer base has changed wildly. And so the guys, the team kind of said to me, how do we realign who we are as an organization from a brand with the teams that we are today and the people that we serve today and who we're going to be moving forward versus what we've done historically? And so I think that commentary from your CEO it's not wildly unfair, and it's not something that we don't hear all the time, right? Just being honest, like we were known as the medical team for a long time, and it takes a minute to change that perspective. And so what we wanted to do with cannabis is we really wanted to say, okay, what are the things that we think are important to us? And I'll get back to Florida in a second, because I think Florida is a really unique use case.
I'm selfish. It's the only market I really care about. So
I'm good with it, man. We'll talk about it. I promise we'll lean in on Florida. But when we looked at the brand holistically, we went through all of these exercises of all these different names and all these different brand approaches. And very early on, we had this concept of empathetic education. We want to lean in on empathetic education. We want to make the retail experience feel as approachable and as comfortable as possible, but also understanding that, and I use this stat all the time, and the stat changes, I'm sure every 15 minutes, right? Like, how much are we doing in 5 years as an industry, as a revenue model, right? So let's say that we're a $20, $25 billion, $30 billion market right now. We're going to be, I don't know, take your pick, 75, 100 billion, whatever, at full maturity over the next half a decade, right? Our current customers are not going to smoke 5 times as much weed, right? Like, we don't know 75% of our customers right now. They haven't come into the space. And so when you think about building a brand under that concept, you say, okay, well, as newer users, what's going to be important to them? Helping to find the right things, getting great recommendations, feeling a level of comfort. Dispensary experiences can be a little bit intimidating if you've never been in one, and they can be embarrassing. Like, you go in the cattle chute, you go up to the point of sale, you got somebody staring at you who knows what they're talking about, and they're like, what do you want? And that kind of sucks. That model kind of sucks, right? And we're all guilty of it.
I agree, man. I want to interject with that real quick, because so you would almost expect that a little bit down here in the medical state of Florida, where it is very sterile. You can't see the products. You can't take them out and smell them. But even in recreational markets, there are so many, and I'll call them heady dispensaries, right? Where, like, listen, I understand the culture, I respect and all that, but I also just happen to be someone who was a professional that really enjoyed cannabis, and I had to be closeted about it, right? I never really got into the culture. It wasn't until I got into the industry that I really started deep diving into cannabis and the terpenes and all that other stuff, and really educating myself on it. And it's interesting to me because I'll go to dispensaries and, they still talk high THC percentages, and they still talk the strongest products and getting as stoned as you can and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I am purely a recreational user, but like, I don't want to do the gravity bong hits I did in college anymore. The same way that I'm not drinking an entire bottle of Kentucky Gentleman anymore. I'm going to buy a nicer whiskey and sip on it. Right?
That's right.
So I want a good quality I want good quality cannabis that I can roll. It'll roll nicely, and I can smoke a little bit of it and feel great, or I can smoke a lot of it if I have that kind of night, right? And it's interesting to me that even the ones that have done a very good job, you know what? I'm going to call them out. Planet 13. Planet 13 in Las Vegas is a beautiful, beautiful store. I don't think anybody would argue that fact. They have more stuff in it than anybody else. You go to Planet 13 in Vegas, you can see everything you want. You go to the register, they don't have a menu. They don't have a system that tells you what's in stock. They don't have any of that. So literally because I went to Planet 13 twice in the past 3.5 weeks. We had a trip to Vegas for Heisman, and then we went to MJ BizCon. And on the way out of MJ BizCon, I remembered our experience last time, and I literally went around each case and I snapped a picture of what I wanted while I was waiting for my register open, because I remembered last time I was there, I got to the register and I was literally running back and forth between the register and the cases to remember what I wanted.
That's right.
On top of that, so let's take Packwoods, for example. I'm a big fan of Packwoods now. I just discovered them. To me, they're like the cigars of cannabis. The ones they have on display are not necessarily what's in stock, nor does the bud tender have a computerized system that tells her what's in stock. She has 3 different zones that have drawers in them that she has to go and open the drawer and find out. Now, again, I'm not intimate with the inner workings of a dispensary. I don't know all the softwares that are available there, but I'd like to think there's some kind of inventory system that can solve this problem. To your point exactly, I think this is a work in progress across the board with everybody, because even the people who would say are some of the experiential leaders in the dispensary space, the buying experience sucks. And it really does suck. And I probably would have bought more from them should there have been some kind of digital menu, or at least if I could have said, what Packwoods do you have in stock while you're standing here, instead of waiting for you to run to the drawer and come back and tell me. So that's my little vent. But I agree with you, man. I don't think anyone's really figured it out.
It's not an unfair vent. And I'll get to this thing that's flashing and annoying the shit out of us behind me here in a minute, because there's a reason for it. And I should have shut it off, but I didn't, so we can talk about it.
It's fine.
But I'll talk about what that is in a minute. I think that's going to help to fix some of that. But look, to your point, first of all, I'm the last guy to point fingers, right? I don't think anybody is perfect. I don't think anybody's doing anything perfectly. I think as an industry, we've got a lot of room to grow, because if we're putting the customers and the patients at the center of all the decisions that we're making, we're not there yet, right? So let's keep working. There are certain people, though, that are doing some really cool stuff. There's certain brands that are making incredible products. There's certain retailers that are doing great experience, right? But look, to get back to the branding thing, because I want to bring it back to Florida, because my Florida trip is what changed everything for the brand. Okay. So I had gone across the country. I had met with these teams, Columbia Care as a name, you know, the identity, everything. Everybody felt like it was a bit disjointed from who we were. Okay, I hear you guys. We started working on naming conventions. We went through a ton of different stuff. We landed on education. We knew we wanted to focus on education. We were going to build platforms. We're going to build dispensaries to feel that way. I'm going to say this, and I don't want it to come across as like the, you know, rhymes with the Schmed company that would have said something like this, but everybody looks at Apple and says they do a lot of things right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with looking at someone who does something great and saying there's lessons to be learned from that, right? One of the core tenets of what Apple does is they have the Apple Genius Bar, and they've got geniuses running around all over the place. My grandmother, when she first bought an iPhone, she went there every week. They were probably ready to kick her out to learn how to use her iPhone so that she could talk with her grandkids, right? And they never turned her away until she knew how to use FaceTime and everything else. They were all in. So our CEO, Nick, said to me, I want a Genius Bar. Like, I want people to feel like they know that they can come in and there's no stupid question and they can always get help. I said, I think that's great. We should embrace that. Let's lean in. What do you want to call the people? And he was like, well, I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, I mean, look, there's a lot of terms out there for people that are super passionate, right? We could call them herb nerds. We could call them all sorts of stuff. We could call them cannabis. And he's like, ooh, I love that. And I was like, well, look, that's like a sommelier of weed, right? Like there's that name's been used for decades to describe people who are passionate about the plant. We could call our people inside the store cannabis. Let's do it. And he's like, okay, great. So I was like, all right, that sounds good. We're going to call them that. So I go down to Florida. I'm driving around Florida and I see our stores. I'm going to take a shot at our stores for a second. And the sign on the road says Columbia Care. Could have been an insurance company. Could have been an old person home. I'll tell you what they don't do. They don't sell weed. I know that for a fact, because why would you call it Columbia Care, right? In Florida, what makes Florida so unique, among many other things, is the regulations, right? Very tight regs and compliance in Florida. So there's really not much that we can do to advertise the brand in many scenarios outside of the name on the door and the name on the sign. Boy, oh boy, are we leaving a lot on the field here, right? If that's your advertising and you drive by and you don't know what a Columbia Care is, we got a problem.
100%.
So went back up to New York, hanging out in the office, and I said to the guys, I said, what if we just call the whole thing cannabis? Like, let's just name it after the people that work there. And, you know, there are other companies in our space that have names that are, you know, look, we don't sell all plants. We're not a botanist. We're a cannabist. We sell a plant, right? This is what we believe in. If you're looking to buy a peace lily, wrong store. Okay. It's just, that's not us. Right. And so at first, you know, I'm going into the medical team and I'm telling them, hey, we're going to name this thing cannabis. And the pillars of this are going to be that we are unapologetic and approachable. We don't apologize one bit for doing what we do. There's nothing wrong with using cannabis. There's nothing wrong with growing great cannabis. And there's nothing wrong with bringing it to people that want it or need it, period. And they were like, okay, go do it. So we worked with an incredible agency, 22 Squared in Atlanta. They built the brand. We went through a ton of iterations. We landed on Art Deco. I kept it blue, not that blue, not the Columbia Care blue, but I kept it blue out of homage for that, right? We went Art Deco because we're the New York City MSO. What's more Art Deco than New York, right? So we leaned into all of these fun little Easter eggs that I thought would make the brand great. And we wanted to overproduce in a sense, not like gimmicky Disney World, but like I wanted the spaces to feel more comfortable than they had to be. I wanted them to feel more elevated than they probably should be. And everybody, when they walks into the dispensary the first time, they say, wow, this is beautiful. I bet you this place is expensive. And it's not, right? And we're getting ready to flip Florida in December. So in December, I believe, first, second week of December, somewhere around there, I'll get you the inside scoop. You'll be able to go to Delray and you'll be able to go to all these locations and they'll have flipped from the Columbia Care that you know today to cannabis, all the new technology, all the new finishings, the new aesthetic inside. And they're beautiful spaces, man. People dig them.
And I'll tell you, man, from personal experience, it's funny. You bring it back to the Apple store, right? And we talk about the Genius Bar and, you know, I had a probably 10-year career in enterprise IT sales, right?
Okay.
So I used to get frustrated when I'd go into the Apple store because I'd talk to these geniuses and they would talk to me like a novice and I knew more than that. Like if something was wrong, I'd be like, hey, can you meet me on step 8? Because I've tried steps 1 through 7 100 times. I do this for a living, right? I'm like, I have engineers that work on multi-million-dollar infrastructures that are telling me what you're telling me already. So I used to get frustrated with that. But it's interesting now because I have the same experience a lot of times when I go into a dispensary, maybe not 2.5 years ago, but now I'm pretty educated on cannabis. I'm pretty educated in what I personally like and what's out there in the terpene profiles and the cultivars and all that stuff. I was pleasantly surprised by the bud tenders at the Columbia Care in Delray. I was able to have a real conversation with them. It wasn't, they wanted to understand because I think they recognized that I knew what I liked and I knew what I was talking about, that they didn't try to push what they liked on me.
Yeah.
It wasn't their personal preference. They understood what I liked and tried to make, and nobody's perfect. It's really hard to do, especially in cannabis, but they tried to make recommendations based on the things that I told them I like. Other cultivars, you know, I'm a big limonene fan as a dominant terpene, right? And I'll be honest, there aren't too many people at this point that will look at a terpene profile and say, okay, I like this strain. And I really wasn't one of them either. I still go indica sativa hybrid first, and then I look at the terpene profile. And if it's a hybrid, then I really look at it. And I'm still not 100% sure. But, you know, when I went into Columbia Care and I'm not just blowing smoke, they helped me with that a lot. So I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to do with the rebrand and everything else. And I'll be candid, like I tend to try stuff for a while and then not go back to it. I need to go back and go to Columbia Care again because I'm looking at your menu right now and you've got great products. I mean, the cultivars that I want, you've got 31 products right now listed under flower. And for those of you that are watching in Florida, that's rare. It's rare for someone to have that much flower, because we've only been doing flower in this state for 2 years, right? So,
and look, it's tough, right? I mean, you don't have, I look at Colorado and California, and those are markets where you've got outdoor grows. You're never going to have a shortage of supply, right?
Yeah.
Florida is a swamp. So best of luck growing outdoors, right? Everything is indoor or modified greenhouse if you want decent flower. And so, look, man, I appreciate it. And, we've got this concept of meeting people where they are, right? Like everybody's on a journey right now in cannabis. Some people are way further down the path than others. So you can't, to your point, you can't treat everybody like they're standing at the starting line. And you definitely can't treat everybody on the opposite end of the spectrum like they understand and know exactly what they want and what they need. And I don't need you to make any recommendations. I'm good. I literally just came in for this, right? Yeah. So you got to ask those first 2 or 3 questions to be able to say and pick up on those little sort of clues. Where is this person in their journey? Right? Oh, you're talking about terpenes. You're coming right out the gate talking about that. All right. Well, I know you're well past 50% in the journey here, right? So let's talk about that. You're using words like cultivar, right? Okay, not something that we're going to hear out of somebody their first trip in, where they're literally going, I used to smoke in college. I don't even know what it was, right? But I kind of want to get back into it. Do you have any recommendations? And this blinking screen behind me, I'll give that thing a shout out here for a second. So we partnered with this company called Lightbox. Super smart guys. They built an endless aisle function system for big retailers like Nordstrom and Saks and guys like that. Nobody was doing this sort of thing really cleanly in the cannabis space. So one of the founders there is a friend of mine, a former colleague. I don't come from the CPG space. I come from the technology space, actually, like you, more on the startup side. I worked in social media very early on for a long time, did ad tech, spent about 7 years on Madison Avenue. And so I was like, oh, this is great. Okay, we're going to use these. And we built our own proprietary product discovery platform called Forage. Forage is in Florida now, so you can look at it, right? So if you go to forage.io on your computer at any point today, you can go play with that system. And when you log on to it, at first, it's going to be this big, pretty gradient, and you move a thing around and it says the feelings and it changes the color of the gradient. That color is actually algorithmically derived, and that matches to the results with regards to the defining characteristics of the strains and the products on the back end. So then when you get to the end, you're going to see color gradients associated with every single product that's categorized in there. And that's going to basically show you your custom matches for your products, right? But the whole system is predicated off of the most common conversations that we hear in the dispensary, which is, how do people want to feel, right? So as you go through that process, you say, okay, I want to feel, happy. And then it's going to ask you, do you want to dial in that feeling and get more specific? Maybe you don't. How are you planning on using it? Where are you planning on using it? Is it a special occasion, right? What forms are you comfortable with? Maybe you don't like to smoke. I only want edibles, or I only want vapes, or I'm open to anything. And then it starts giving you recommendations. Is it a perfect science? No. What does it do? It helps to guide the discovery process, either collaboratively, so you can use that in a dispensary on one of our large format touchscreens with our associates, or you can use it on your own, right? You could passively use it. Any of these screens that you see in the store, you can just tap your phone to it and transfer the data immediately to your phone via NFC. So, hey, I got a great recommendation. I want to save that for later. Tap your phone. You see an advertisement like what's going behind me right now for 777 or for classics, and I want to download a coupon. Just tap your phone to the screen and it'll download it right to your phone, right? So it allows you to either have a self-guided, self-checkout express experience, or a more collaborative experience with our bud tenders. But either way, especially for newer users, you just start at the very top, man, and come down the funnel and dial in. How do you want to feel? What am I going to be using it for? And then give me some recommendations.
Sorry, I've been doing this whole thing while you've been talking. This thing is
how'd you
cool.
do it?
Okay. It's great. It recommended me Pineapple Express and LSD.
And are you a sativa guy? Did LSD, does that jump high up on the? Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite strains that we grow in Florida. So it's, you probably went right in there. You were probably like a bright pink orange sort of gradient, I would guess, if that's, you were somewhere in like the happy energy ish, right? And you probably said, I'm down to smoke. Give me pre-rolls and loose flower. Give me Ace. And it came back and said, we got LSD.
That's literally everything I just did. I'm a huge sativa guy. I always think that sativa fans are always more loyal to their cultivars than anybody else. They're very
Agreed.
specific.
Agreed.
Yeah, during the day, unless it's like to disconnect at the end of the day, I'm a huge sativa guy. And I really like the way that this walks you through it and lets you can stay kind of vague if you don't know exactly what you want, or you can click more options and get more specifics. I think this is really cool. I didn't even know that you guys had this.
Yeah, the other cool thing the other interesting thing that I've noticed, we have a lot of systems that allow us to aggregate a ton of data and really understand a lot about the consumer experience, right? Coming from my background, building systems like Forage and virtual care and all of these different things that we've done over the last year and a half, it allows me to watch and observe and consume a lot more. I have a theory about the sativa loyalists. I think that if you're a sativa or a sativa leaning hybrid user, you don't care about, you're not stuck in the testing game, in the THC game, right? So, you and I both know if you're coming in hunting for a 30%er, it's going to be an indica or an indica leaning hybrid, whatever it may be, right? If you're a sativa person, you're an active daily user that knows what works well for you. You're a sour diesel guy, you're an LSD, whatever it may be, right? And you stay right there and you do have a ton of loyalty to it, but you're not concerned. You're not as concerned with that testing number. We see people really in that 15 to 22% wanting to stay right in there, good everyday usage, right? And terpene profiles become incredibly important. Things like limonene, right? We hear that all the time. So it's really interesting, man. Like I said, you can learn a lot about people in a couple of questions, and in using a system like Forage, you start to understand more where they are on their journey and how much of an everyday user they are.
It's interesting. I love this system, and I think you hit the sativa thing spot on. And I believe, like, because I can tell you for a while, and obviously it's one of your competitors, but I was getting Durban julep from one plant, which was only testing at 16 or 17%, which I remember when they went to Cresco, they're like, we're going to drop everything under 20. I'm like, there are some of us that kind of want to microdose, not just get as ripped as we can all the time.
That's
and,
right.
That was a great stream for me. I want to transition because I know we don't have a ton of time left, and there's a ton to talk about. It's interesting you talk about the rebrand, and I had this conversation with someone earlier because I think when the cannabis industry and a lot of the MSOs and the major players came out, we're at a different point where the stigma truly wasn't broken yet. It was still very stigmatic. You look at California cannabis and it was still the stoner culture and everything else like that. And I think these major companies who needed to raise significant capital from people that believed in the stigma of cannabis took a very, very heavy medical approach. The old joke when you see someone smoking weed in a movie, like, no, it's medicinal. Don't worry about it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We took that joke literally and we're like, don't worry. It's medicinal. It's medicinal. But the medicinal market really wasn't ready yet. It wasn't trusted yet. It was still a lot of, and I don't mean it that way. We have Tikkun Olam forever and there's some research and stuff like that. But my point being is that you didn't have a ton of medical patients rushing to get your cards and buy weed. You had people like me who wanted weed that was tested and safe and could buy it like a human inside of a store instead of some college kid's parents' garage like I did before, right? And that's who rushed to get their medical cards. And that's in most markets. So you had cannabis, not even the true stoners, because they have what they like from their black market guy and they're hesitant to come into this space. But I think the group of people who will make up the majority of the cannabis space, the professionals that use weed to relax and unwind, and they chose it over alcohol or different types of medication and things like that, but it's still used it mostly recreationally. I think that's where the market was. So it was always weird to me when you had people who were normal cannabis consumers and consumed it daily, not truly for medicinal. And we can get into the argument if they're using it medicinally or not, even though they say recreationally, but they were going into places like Columbia Care and Liberty Health Sciences. Like, you make that sense. Liberty Health Sciences, I drove by that building for 2 years before I even knew it was a dispensary. I'm like, what? I thought it was a vet for some reason. I don't even know why. Just the way the building, I think there was a vet in the building before, and I'm like, oh, it's a new vet. That's cool. I take my dog there. It's like, well, this isn't the right medicine for him. So It's interesting to me. I think now, especially after COVID, after this lockdown, and I think, the unfortunate side of the pandemic was unfortunate, but for our industry, it kind of opened everyone's eyes for us. And we all kind of said, yeah, we don't really care if you smoke weed or not that much, right? Like
Yeah.
the acceptance, the public acceptance has shot up. And I think we're all at a point now where we're like, oh, we don't have to pretend that we're Pfizer or Johnson and Johnson and we're coming out with medical cannabis anymore. We can just embrace the roots of the cannabis industry and be who we are. And whether you're going to use it medicinally, whether you're going to use it therapeutically, or whether you're going to use it recreationally, we've got something for you. And come on in, because this is now the cannabis community. And which is why I think the timing of your rebrand is great. And that's why I love hearing it. I mean, 2.5 years ago, I was at MJ BizCon in a suit. I was at MJ BizCon in a suit without a tie, because I wanted to be fun. But
Gotta be cool.
this last time when I'm there raising capital, when I'm there promoting a new company I launched, I'm in a t-shirt and jeans and sneakers. And everybody who came into my room, with the exception of the top CEOs and funds, were wearing t-shirts or casual. And I think 2 people had jackets in our suite that we entertained for meetings. And that, you look at your profile pictures and everything, you're suited up all the time. You're a New York guy, but you come on the show. I was surprised to see you in a t-shirt and a backwards hat. I'm like, all
Oh my
right,
God.
I get
All
it.
right. I am, so my head of HR would be thrilled that you said that. I wear the same thing every day. I wear a suit jacket to funerals, weddings, and apparently LinkedIn profile pictures.
Yes.
I literally wear the same hat and the same black t-shirt every day. It's like one of the things that I'm made fun of for constantly. If you saw me at MJ BizCon, most of the time that I was there, I was wearing a black t-shirt, my Seed and Strain hat, and a pair of white Adidas every day. However, I did dress like an adult for one of the panels because I knew everybody else was going to be dressed like an adult and I didn't want to be that guy. Mm-hmm. So I think I was still wearing a hat, but I was wearing a long sleeve shirt and I maybe even had a vest on. I went full New York, right? But I get in trouble all the time because I'll wear a hat on calls and I'll get, an email from HR being like, seriously, a hat, like at some point, are you going to pretend to be an adult? But it's true, man. And you know what? I think maybe my perspective on this comes from coming through ad tech and social media. When I was early in that space, I felt like I had to dress the part, and you thought the part was suited up, right? Like I got to be an exec. And by the end, I was wearing the same thing every day, which is again, a black t-shirt and a hat and jeans and shoes. And I think that's where our industry is heading. I see so many parallels between social media and cannabis. There's so much there. There's people that are very passionate about it. There's people that are very wary about it. There's massive scale from an addressable market point of view. There's incredible nascency from a systems and process point of view. There's tons of money that's interested in getting in, but they don't know. In our case, they can't. In social, it was how and where and who do I put the bets on? Consolidation is coming, right? When we first joined Facebook, we worked with Facebook engineering before there was a preferred marketing developer program. But when they launched the PMD program, I think there's like 450 insights partners. 2 years later, there was like 30, right? So you're going to continue to see those sort of things in our space. But I think it's okay that we don't take ourselves that seriously. And to your point earlier, along those lines, I've always had a bit of a problem, and I've always observed a bit of a push and pull on this concept of medical versus adult use recreational, right? 80% of our customers, I would put in the bucket of health and wellness. The medical goes as far as an Advil or a glass of Chardonnay, right? And so who gets to decide, at what point do you decide when something is medicine versus something that you're just casually using to feel better, right? Isn't that the whole concept of medicine, is things that we interject into our life in order to help feel better about something that's bothering us, or proactively treat something that we don't want to bother us, right? And to me, and again, super biased, right? I'm in the space and I'm a user, but cannabis is an incredibly gentle way to approach so many of those things. And so, I just think that you're going to see that stigma continue to change, and you're going to see that medicinal concept continue to wane off some, because there's a subset of users that we serve that are truly medical, and they need incredibly precise, dosed, highly potent medicine in order to be a part of their wellness regimen, to treat things that are really wrong, right? And then there are users, to your point, that are way over here that are like, they're coming in and they want I want the best of what you got to not, I don't want to remember tomorrow, right? Like I'm ready to get bananas, and that's fine too, right? The vast majority of the people that we serve as an organization are in the middle, health and wellness, working professionals wanting to cut back. I just had a conversation with one of my best friends last night via text that was like, dude, I have almost cut alcohol out of my life completely. And I felt like I was in a really unhealthy place with alcohol during the pandemic.
I had 3 drinks total at MJ Biz, I think.
Yep.
And they were sipping drinks because I still like the taste of it. But someone was talking about, I think I was smoking, I was talking about a Packwoods, and I'm like, yeah, it's funny. It tastes great with a glass of wine. Like, and I'll do that now, and I'll have a glass, but I'll smoke, and it's enjoyable to me. And it's funny. I'm the same way. I've almost cut alcohol completely out. And it's interesting because there's always the debate about doing it during the day or doing it during work and everything else like that. Cannabis to me is so hard to compare to something else because there isn't something else that is really, really like it, right?
Yeah.
You can use it full recreationally. You can get super fucked up off of it, and you can take a little bit and just feel normal, not feel super anxious, not feel all over the place, and help you focus in. I always say, for me, I got a million things running through my mind, good thoughts, bad thoughts, all the whole thing. I have a lot of things that I need to do throughout the day. And when I leverage cannabis, it allows me to kind of compartmentalize all those thoughts, kind of not forget them, not forget my troubles, just kind of push them aside so I can focus on what I need to get done. Because it makes me realize if I don't get done what I need to get done, all those thoughts, all those things, they're only going to get worse, because that's the anxiety comes from making sure I get done what I need to get done. Right. So people will argue and be like, oh, you're a lazy stoner, you smoke weed all day and everything else like that. Well, at the end of the day, if I was taking Zoloft or Prozac or any of these prescription drugs, no one bat an eye. Maybe they'd even commend me for trying to do something, for recognizing that I have things that are wrong with me and going to a doctor and trying to do something about it. But if I go, and it goes back to like natural medicine, as long as the doctor tells me this thing he's giving me is okay, and we don't need to get into pharmaceutical companies and payments and all that stuff, because I think there's really great medicine out there too, some bullshit. But, if I went and found this plant and I take a little bit of it and I can still function normal, I can still have great conversations, I can think better. And in some places, it's actually a performance enhancer because it's been demonized for so long and because people are ignorant. And I don't mean ignorant as in like assholes. I mean ignorant as in they've never actually tried it, so they don't have the experience to speak from. They demonize it. And that's always been what's crazy to me. And that's where it goes back to that medical recreational, because I do both. I do the microdoses of sativa. And when I say microdose, I smoke a little bit. So this way it gets me to where I need to be, but I still know what I have to do. And then come Friday night, when I want to watch the latest stand-up that I love, I want to get a little bit further than I am during the day. I want to be able to disconnect and laugh my ass off, right? So that's what's always intrigued me, is there's no real comparison. We can't compare it to alcohol. We can't compare it to wine. We can compare subsets of the industry to that, but overall, there's no comparison.
I think we can compare passion and appreciation for some of the nuances of cannabis to things like wine and scotch and whiskey and stuff like that, where people latch on to certain flavor profiles or smokiness or peatiness in a scotch, or, the different terroirs across the world of the way that wine is grown and produced and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of similarities there, but I think, to your point, there's more things that are different about it than the same. And look, I think this is actually a really interesting segue into talking about Tyson. I know you want to talk about Tyson. I know
what gave it away.
I know. I want to lean in.
I almost took a Sharpie and drew the tattoo on my face.
That would have been bold, appreciated, but bold. Look, we got a lot of questions, right? Yesterday, the reception was overwhelmingly positive to the launch, but we did get questions about, why was Mike a fit for you guys as a personality? He obviously has a past that, we don't condone everything that was done in his past. He's been a polarizing figure at times, right? So why was Mike a fit? And I'll tell you why. Because we are completely aligned in purpose around so much of what you've just been talking about. If you meet Mike and his team and you talk to them, there is a genuine and authentic drive to expand the conversation around mental health and wellness, and what cannabis has done for him in his life, and what he'll just come out and talk about it, right? About what a bad place he's been at certain times, or certain substances that he's used that he doesn't use anymore. In the Forbes article yesterday, he talks about how he's never taken this few pills in his life. Psilocybin, MDMA, cannabis, so many things have been a part of his journey that he openly talks about. But cannabis is something he uses every day, and he wants to bring that conversation into people where there's still a stigma. And look, he's a unique perspective and voice that people are listening to. And for us, it's not our brand, right? We're the cultivation and manufacturing partner across the country. So we're gonna provide the plants and we're gonna provide the products in order for him to help spread that vision and that message. That's why we grow them, right? Like we grow these plants to get them into people's lives. And if Mike creates another avenue and another channel for us to be able to have real conversations about those things, that's a home run. Like that's good alignment for us as an organization. So, I mean, we couldn't be more excited about the partnership with him, man. And it's been fun.
There's no other brand outside of Heisman that I'm more excited to see in the market and try. And clearly there's reason for that. I agree with you, man. I mean, listen, I don't know if there are too many people in the world outside of his friends and family that have heard Mike talk more than me. And I say that because I listen to all of his podcasts. I listen to every episode of Hotboxing.
Hotboxing's so good.
When he's on, I kind of miss Evan Britton, but that's another story for another day. I love Hotboxing. Whenever he's on a long form podcast, I tend to watch it. I got to watch the one he was on with Menry, the Full Send episode. He did 2 amazing episodes with Rogan where him and Rogan really got into this and talked about Mike's journey. And it's been a dream of mine to interview him, although I don't know if I can do much better than Rogan did, because we had this conversation right before the show started. He went from being the baddest man on the planet to Uncle Mike. I still wouldn't take a punch in the face from him for $5 million. And I mean that. It's the only time I ever mean that, because it would cost me that much to reconstruct my face. But, Mike was the baddest man on the planet. He was the epitome of a bad boy. He did everything. He owned freaking tigers, right? And I told you, he lived down the street from me. He lived in the quarry. He had 5 security guards with all Mitsubishi Monteros. I don't know at the time. He was a huge guy, but he was also really nice back then. And you listen to him and you listen to his journey on Rogan and how he reinvented himself. And he talked about how cannabis helped him, that he didn't like the guy he was when he wasn't high, but he did like the guy that he was when he was on cannabis. And he was able to kind of transcend that into being that person all the time. And then he had the experiences with the psychedelics that kind of showed him different perspectives about his life and where he was right and where he was wrong and all of that. And if that's what it takes to get a guy like Mike Tyson, who could end your life with one swing of his arm, to become this gentle older statesman, then how can it really be that bad, right? Mike wasn't a guy who ended up, there were drugs that ruined his life in the beginning. And then he found, I don't want to say the right drugs, but he found things that helped him become a better person, helped him gain perspective in life. And if there's something that helps people gain perspective, I'm all for it. I'm really excited for this brand. I love Mike. I think he's one of the few genuine celebrities in this space that doesn't always just slap his name on a product, that, he walks the walk, he talks the talk. I'm sure he consumes his products. He was a very big advocate for it with athletes at first. I think Mike pulled a lot of people out of the shadows. I won't give him credit for Ricky, but I'm sure with Rick, because Ricky for a while shied away from his cannabis, and he'll tell you that firsthand, because he was trying to get back in the public eye and was trying to do analyst work and was on the SEC network and everything else. But that's what people always knew him for. And he'll tell you in 2017, he did a conference and that all changed. I imagine that Mike being in the public eye and being the person that he was and talking about it helped somebody like Ricky come out and say, oh, it's cool for me now. Like, you guys weren't cool with this back then, but if you're cool with Mike, maybe you'll be cool with me. Right. So I love Mike. I love what you guys are doing. I'm glad. So are we going to be, so let's talk about the brand itself. Are we going to see Tyson 2.0 products in Florida?
Yes, you will.
We will. Excellent.
So you will see Tyson 2.0 products across the country. Obviously in highly regulatory and compliant markets, right? There's processes that need to be gone through, right? We've got incredibly talented cultivation teams across the country that are, going to be chomping at the bit to make sure that we are growing strains and producing products that align. I can tell you, Mike and his team are very, very hands-on. Adam Wilkes, the CEO at Tyson, these guys, they know their stuff.
Yeah.
I
love what he did with one plant. So,
dude, I'm telling you right now, these guys did not come into this partnership to say, okay, just put whatever you want in the jar and we'll call it a day. Yeah. That is not what's happening here. So they're leaning in. They want to be involved, as they should be, and as we're fully signed up for, right? We're going to work collaboratively with them on making sure that we're either taking some of the best things that we already have available in market that are now going to be coming to market that we've been looking for a home. Great. They just found a home within Tyson, or bringing in those genetics across the country in order to map to the things that he's passionate about. Cause he, like, the first 5 minutes that you sit down with Mike, he'll ask you, he'll be like, do you have this? He's like, he wants to know, do you have this strain? Right. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be a process. I don't want to sit here and set the expectation that, your Thanksgiving dinner is going to be better because Mike's going to be in Florida. Like, I don't know if we can get there. But over the coming months, you're going to see exclusive drops of genetics throughout the country. And then you're going to see more rolling, scaled out sales throughout all of our states that we operate.
Very cool, man. I'm curious to know, and obviously this is a selfish question for me because you know
Sure.
what I do for a living.
Yeah.
How are you going to handle the brand down here when we are so freaking restricted? And again, you know as well as I do, it's got to be in white opaque packaging, and that packaging for the most part is probably going to still say Columbia Care on it, and maybe it'll have Tyson 2.0 somewhere, but that's what you have to have, and you can't really have too much in-store signage. And it's I almost feel like in Florida, and it's unfortunate because I would love to bring Heisman down here as well too, but like as a brand, I'm not sure how we can make a difference short of either providing our genetics or curating what we think is best. Like, we can't really give the look and feel. Maybe we put some of our merch in stores, but I'm always curious to understand, how do you work within the confines that have been set for us in this state?
Yeah, no, look, it's incredibly tough. You first of all, you're not going to build a brand off the packaging on flower. We know that, right? White opaque, it'll now say moving forward cannabis, right?
Cannabis, yep.
But it'll say right underneath it, it'll say, Tyson 2.0 and strain information. And so you're not going to build it off packaging. Okay. You can do some cool stuff in in-store experience. You can have a lot of fun with digital. You can do some other things to help build that brand and awareness. You can put some blanks and some packaging out on the shelf that, hey, this is what it looks like in every other market. It's not going to look like this. It's not going to look like
you're missing out on.
It's not going to look like this when you get it. Like, here's
your packaging is awesome with the glove on it, the Mylar bags with the glove and everything else.
It's going to be, they're working on, they've got a talented team over there. I spent some time with one of their designers, KD, when I was in Vegas. They got a talented team. So that packaging is just going to continue to get cooler and cooler. And we've got some fun stuff in store that we're going to be rolling out. Right. But look, I think in a state like Florida, you got to be there, especially if you're going to be offering, genetics that are unique and stuff like that. Just get there and find the right partners. My advice to you, right? Shameless plug for Heisman, shameless plug for cannabis. You got to find the right partners at the retail level that are committed to helping you do that are committed to helping you build the brand, that are going to help you build the in-store experiences, that are going to help you take it as far as you can compliantly, right? To be able to create some sort of personality around that brand that is, above and beyond just the name underneath the operator on that white package in Florida.
Yeah, man, it's going to be challenging, but I agree with you on that. I agree that you kind of have to be here and get it started. Florida is such an interesting market because we have now 620,000 patients. Yeah. And we did $1.2 billion last year at 450,000 patients. So we were tied for number 3 market in the country, purely medical, rec sales, and such a limited audience. So like, it's interesting because from a sales standpoint, you should be here, but from a marketing and branding standpoint, it's like, what am I doing? So that's really cool.
Yeah. As look, from one brand guy to another, right? You got to build the brand everywhere else. And then you got to also be in Florida. You can't build the brand in Florida and then also be everywhere else. So you got to find these other markets where you're really going to be able to identify that personality and really drive that brand promise and build that sort of equity and awareness, and then bring it to Florida. And you will also be in Florida.
That rebrand is happening. You guys are already cannabis on the OMMU report.
It's true.
It's public. You guys can go see it. I didn't break anything.
True. If you go to the OMMU, it's going to say cannabis, not Columbia Care. So yeah, I mean, it's happening, man.
Very cool, man. So I have one more last question because we're getting up against the time. There's so much. We're gonna have to do this again because there's so much more that I can talk to you about. Yeah. I'm curious. The Northeast is a very interesting market to me, and obviously that's where you are, New York, New Jersey. They purposely call it the tri-state area, and then also, even lump in Massachusetts into that, Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, all that. To me, it's an interesting place because I think, and again, as I'm building this brand, we try to find people who are really good in their individual markets. And California is a huge state, Nevada is a huge state, Arizona, the West Coast, Florida is a huge state. But I feel when you get to the Northeast, that this is where MSOs truly you guys have great advantages because you're well capitalized and you have the ability to hire great people and all that. But I feel like you truly have the advantages in the Northeast because the Northeast is going to operate as a single market. As much as it is individualized states, there's just too much homogeny across those markets. There's so many people that work in Manhattan and live in Westchester or live in New Jersey or live in Connecticut, live elsewhere. There are so many people that split time between Massachusetts and New York from a business standpoint, people that are going over to Pennsylvania. So to me, I look at someone like you and I feel like you have a true advantage because people who are going to consume cannabis in the Northeast, they're going to want to consume it all over the Northeast. And if they go somewhere that they've never bought before and they're we'll call it a cannabis client, they're going to look for a cannabis first before they look for anything else.
Look, I agree. I think the Northeast is incredibly unique. When you talk about that tri-state area, I'll give you a funny fact that I heard the other day. Do you know what the #1 betting location in New Jersey was last year?
#1 betting location?
Mm-hmm. What's the single location that processed the most money for sports betting?
Hoboken?
Yeah, the PATH train.
Oh, shit. That makes sense.
Bigger than Atlantic City. People would literally get on the PATH train on their phone, jump over, make their bet, and come back home to the city.
That's crazy. So that whatever that bullshit first stop is, people would go there, make the bet, and turn around, and go back into the city because it's like a 15-minute journey.
Have you a hangout, sip you a drink, put your bet in, head right back over, right? I started thinking about that after I heard that, and I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense because of what we're seeing in New Jersey, right? And in markets like Massachusetts surrounding New York. I think that, we're seeing a lot of velocity out of the program in New York. I think that when you talk about upside, I mean, let's just take a minute. Let me take off my MSO hat for a second, which is tough, right? But let's just talk about New York for a second. So you just said over $1 billion, 600 some odd thousand patients in Florida, right? New York is a medical market right now. It's like 150,000 patients. It's like 100 some odd $1 million a year in TAM. Okay. When it flips full rec, that's $3 to $5 billion a year all day.
You don't have to convince me. I tell everybody this, and the people who are California purists want to punch me in the face. New York will be the #1 cannabis market in the world. By far. It will leap. I honestly think the 5 boroughs will compete with California on their own.
Listen, I always joke around with people I was born on Long Island. I just relocated down after living in Lower Manhattan for 7 years with my wife. We had our son there. I worked on Madison Avenue. If stress, anxiety, the presence of good food and good music are all precursors for high cannabis usage, let me tell you something. Go ahead and sign up New York, right? As being one of the epicenters of the planet of this industry. And so I think that to that point though, look, we're very well positioned. There's no secret in the industry that Columbia Care is incredibly well positioned in the space in the Northeast. We've got New York, we've got New Jersey, we've got Massachusetts.
And you guys were the first ones to put flower into New York.
First sale. We got Maryland and DC. We got Virginia, which is going to be an incredible market, right? You got West Virginia. I mean, the East Coast is interesting, and we're sitting there watching it right now, and we're heavily invested. I mean, we just announced 34 acres and almost 1 million square feet under glass in Riverhead in Long Island. That's the facility that's going to be the bet. That's the axe on the East Coast, right? In Colorado, we've got 140 acres of outdoor and big facilities for indoor, right? These are almost not only the hedges of interstate, but also just showing the presence that in the big markets that are adult use and recreational, where we operate vertically integrated, we're leaning in and we're committed to being, incredibly scaled operators in those spaces.
Yeah. It's intriguing to me. I think you guys are set up great for the Northeast. And, listen, there's going to be a whole East Coast, West Coast cannabis battle. It's going to be like the rap days again.
Agreed.
California, you have a deep tradition of cultivating and consuming
Yeah.
cannabis. The East Coast consumes just as much cannabis as you guys. We were just a whole lot more closeted about it because we didn't cultivate it here. It wasn't part of the culture. We just bought it from a dude off his bike, out of his backpack, or wherever we could. And we consumed it and we got about our day because that's just what the East Coast had to do. I believe you. I think Manhattan will be the #1 city for cannabis sales. I think it's going to make the city that much greater. I think they're going to lead the charge with experiences and experiential. I mean, we don't know. I mean, we know what the laws are exactly. They're kind of like gray right now, but you had the Happy Monkey partnering with the Van Gogh experience for a cannabis driven art installation. And to me, that's the start. That's where it starts. And it's only going to get further from there. And New York is going to innovate it because they're the capital of the world. At the end of the day, New York City is the capital of the entire world. And until that changes, I don't think cannabis or anything else will be any different.
No, hey, listen, I'm not going to disagree. Obviously, as somebody who operates across many, many states, every state's got their own unique thing, but New York definitely has a unique flavor to it. And I think it's going to be an incredible market. And another call out, Van Gogh, if you haven't done, we are not associated. I'm not associated with that in any way, but if you haven't done the Van Gogh experience, if it comes to a city near you, do it. It's incredible.
It was in Miami. It's great, but I do have a hard stop. Unfortunately, I have a job now that I have to do. Jesse, man, it was an absolute pleasure. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. We'll do this again. Before
Anytime.
I let you go, get all the plugs, get everything out there.
Oh, I mean, look, find a Columbia Care, find a cannabis, a TGS, a Project Cannabis, a THCSD near you. G-Leaf. We just launched Classics across the country, which is an incredibly fun brand. Go grab one of the pre-roll tins. People love them. I had people coming up to me at MJ BizCon being like, this is my new favorite package. So go grab a pre-roll tin and use it as sort of your stash space. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're excited to serve. We're going to keep trying to lean in and innovating and creating better stuff. And if you're a customer or a patient of ours, reach out, tell us what we can be doing better and give us a shot, right? To continue to keep getting better in the markets where we're at. So congrats on everything with Heisman, man. I'm super excited to see it come to life. Yeah, happy to do this again anytime. Let me know.
Absolutely. Well, folks, depending on how the conversation ends after we end this show, maybe you'll find Heisman products on the shelves at Columbia Care. We'll see.
Love it. Love it.
All right, folks. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back again next week for you with another live show on Friday. Folks, I really appreciate you putting up with my sporadic schedule. We're going to put these out whenever we can, whenever I have time. But of course, if you ever miss an episode, every week after we record them, they'll be live on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. Or if you're in the car or anywhere else where you can't sit in front of your screen, check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places where you find your podcast, folks. It's been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. We'll see you next week.